The recorded history of the Middle East begins in ancient Mesopotamia, where human societies first transitioned from a nomadic lifestyle to permanent agriculture-based settlements. By the late 4th millennium BC, the Sumerians in southern Mesopotamia had developed the world's oldest known urban and literate civilization. This early society pioneered many fundamental technologies and institutions. They built the first cities, invented unified writing, and established complex bureaucracies and legal codes. Nearby, ancient Egypt also emerged around 3150 BC as a united civilization. Together, these societies characterized the Fertile Crescent, which stretches from Mesopotamia through the Levant to the Nile as the home of numerous advanced cultures and what would later be called the Cradle of civilization. In the centuries that followed, numerous empires rose and fell throughout the ancient Middle East. The Sumerian city-states were followed around 2400 BC by the Akkadian Empire, which in turn gave way to subsequent Mesopotamian powers like Babylonia and Assyria. These empires existed for over 1,500 years and dominated the region through military strength, administrative innovation, and cultural sophistication. Meanwhile, the Phoenicians established several maritime city-states in the Levantine corridor, trading extensively across the Mediterranean and developing an early alphabet that would become the basis of the Greek and Latin scripts, and ultimately the modern alphabet used in much of the world today. Further east in the 6th century BC, the Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great, conquered Mesopotamia, Egypt, and large parts of Western Asia. This was a crucial moment. For the first time, the disparate regions of the Middle East were united under one imperial system, laying the foundation for a lasting imperial tradition in the region. During this period of classical antiquity, the Middle East encountered a new set of cultural and political influences from the West. In 334 BC, Alexander the Great of Macedon invaded and eventually overthrew the vast Persian Achaemenid Empire, which stretched from modern-day Turkey to Afghanistan. Although Alexander died in 323 BC, and his empire quickly disintegrated, his conquests introduced Hellenistic culture throughout the Middle East. Successor states like the Seleucid Empire in Syria and Mesopotamia, and the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, preserved and adapted Greek culture, language, and governance. Major urban centers like Alexandria and Antioch became hubs of Greek scholarship and multicultural exchange. This fusion of Greek and local traditions helped create a cosmopolitan environment that connected East and West, enabling the transmission of ideas, arts, and sciences that would resonate for centuries. As the Hellenistic kingdoms waned, the Middle East increasingly fell under the influence of another rising power, Rome. By the 1st century BC, the Roman Republic, soon to become the Roman Empire, had expanded its influence into the eastern Mediterranean. Roman forces gradually annexed large parts of the region, including Asia Minor, the Levant, and Egypt, transforming them into prosperous provinces of a vast imperial system. The Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability lasting roughly 2 centuries, brought economic integration, infrastructural development, and administrative cohesion. During this Roman era, one of the most consequential religious developments in world history occurred: the emergence of Christianity, which originated in the 1st century AD in the Roman province of Judea as a reformist movement within Judaism. Christianity spread rapidly throughout the empire despite early persecution. By the early 4th century, Emperor Constantine had embraced the faith and in 313 AD issued the Edict of Milan, granting religious tolerance throughout the empire. In 330 AD, he founded Constantinople as the new imperial capital, and by the end of the century, Christianity had become the official religion of the Roman Empire, replacing classical paganism and profoundly reshaping the cultural and spiritual landscape of the Middle East. The transformation of the Roman world into a Christian empire marked a critical turning point for both European and Middle Eastern history. Nevertheless, Roman rule over the region was never absolute. From the 3rd to the 7th century AD, the eastern provinces of the empire, now administered from Constantinople and known as the Byzantine Empire, were in near-continuous conflict with a revitalized Persian state, the Sasanian Empire. These two superpowers, the Byzantine and Sasanian empires, divided the Middle East between them, with the Byzantines holding Anatolia, the Levant and Egypt, and the Sasanians ruling over Iran, Mesopotamia, and parts of the Arabian frontier. Their long-standing rivalry culminated in a devastating series of wars that peaked in the Byzantine-Sasanian War of 602 to 628 AD, leaving both empires militarily exhausted and politically destabilized. This mutual weakening created a historical opening for a new force that would fundamentally reshape the region. In the early 7th century, a revolutionary religious and political movement emerged on the Arabian Peninsula, Islam. The Prophet Muhammad, born around 570 AD in Mecca, began preaching in 610 AD, delivering a message of strict monotheism and social justice that drew upon and reinterpreted earlier Jewish and Christian traditions. Muhammad's success in uniting the Arab tribes under the banner of Islam was unprecedented. Following his death in 632 AD, his successors, the caliphs, initiated a series of astonishingly rapid and successful conquests that filled the power vacuum left by the declining Byzantine and Sasanian empires. Within just 2 decades, Muslim forces had wrested Syria and Palestine from Byzantine control, conquered Egypt by 642, and completely destroyed the Sasanian state by 651. The Rashidun Caliphate thus emerged as a dominant imperial power controlling Mesopotamia, Persia, the Levant, and Egypt, stretching from North Africa to the borders of India. These conquests were not merely military successes but also marked a civilizational turning point. Islam became both a unifying religious identity and the foundation of a new imperial order. Arabic was adopted as the language of administration, gradually displacing previously used Greek, Aramaic, and Persian. Over time, most of the region's inhabitants spoke Arabic and converted to Islam, although Christian, Jewish, and other religious minorities continued to live under Islamic rule, often protected but subject to legal and fiscal distinctions under the status of dhimmis. Following the rapid conquests, the Islamic world entered a phase of political consolidation and cultural flourishing. The Umayyad Caliphate, founded in 661 with its capital in Damascus, ruled over a vast empire stretching from Spain to the Indus River. The Umayyads built enduring monuments like the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, completed in 692, and expanded infrastructure and administration to maintain control over their diverse subjects. Their rule, however, was marked by tensions, particularly with non-Arab converts and followers of the Shia branch of Islam, which culminated in the Abbasid Revolution. In 750, the Abbasids overthrew the Umayyads and established a new dynasty with its capital in Baghdad. Under Abbasid rule, the Islamic world entered what is often referred to as its Golden Age. Baghdad became a global center of learning, trade, and culture. The House of Wisdom, founded in the early 9th century, became a hub for scholars who translated Greek philosophical and scientific texts into Arabic, preserving classical knowledge and greatly expanding upon it. Advancements were made in mathematics, algebra, algorithms, medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and literature. Economically, the Abbasids benefited from their control over the Silk Road, facilitating connections between East and West. Culturally, their rule represented a synthesis of Arab, Persian, Hellenistic, and Indian influences, producing innovations from the development of Arabic numerals to literary classics like 1001 Nights. Yet by the 10th century, the unity of the Abbasid Caliphate began to fracture. The sheer size of the empire made it increasingly difficult to govern effectively, and regional dynasties began to assert autonomy while at least nominally recognizing the spiritual authority of the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad. In Iran and Iraq, Persian regimes like the Buyids dominated from the mid-10th century, while Turkic warlords like the Seljuks rose to power in the 11th century, claiming to protect the Abbasid caliphs as their military patrons. Meanwhile, rival caliphates emerged, most notably the Fatimids of Egypt, who established a Shia regime in the early 10th century that directly challenged Abbasid supremacy and highlighted the growing sectarian divisions within Islam. This period of political fragmentation also exposed the Islamic world to new external pressures. In the late 11th century, feudal lords and knights from Western Europe launched a series of religiously motivated invasions known as the Crusades. These campaigns, which lasted until the end of the 13th century, resulted in the establishment of several short-lived crusader states in the Levant, particularly in Syria and Palestine. Despite the Crusaders' initial successes, Muslim resistance gradually intensified. The Ayyubid dynasty under Saladin recaptured Jerusalem in 1187, and eventually, the Mamluks of Egypt emerged as the dominant defenders of the Islamic world, defeating the last Crusader strongholds by 1291. Simultaneously, a far more devastating threat emerged from the east, the Mongols. In 1258, Mongol armies led by Hulagu Khan sacked Baghdad, destroying the city and bringing the Abbasid Caliphate to a catastrophic end. The destruction of Baghdad, the intellectual and cultural heart of the Islamic world, marked a turning point. The Mongols subsequently ravaged large parts of Persia and Mesopotamia. However, their advance into the Levant was halted in 1260 at the Battle of Ain Jalut by the Mamluks, who once again proved to be the crucial protectors of the region. Following the Mongol devastation, the Middle East remained politically fragmented. The Mamluk Sultanate ruled over Egypt and Syria, while the Mongols in Persia founded the Ilkhanate, one of several successor states to the Mongol Empire. In Anatolia, the once powerful Seljuk Empire had collapsed, giving way to a collection of smaller Turkic principalities known as beyliks. Among these, one would eventually rise to prominence and establish a new imperial order across the entire region. The Ottoman Empire, founded by the Turkic tribal leader Osman around the year 1300, began as a small frontier state but steadily expanded throughout the 14th and 15th centuries. In 1453, the Ottomans under Sultan Mehmed II conquered Constantinople, the capital of the long-declining Byzantine Empire, and renamed it Istanbul. This conquest was not only a symbolic end to the Christian Roman Empire in the East, but also established the Ottomans as the leading power in the Islamic world. In the following decades, they absorbed other Turkic and Islamic states, and in 1516 to 1517, Sultan Selim I defeated the Mamluks, bringing Egypt, Syria, and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina under Ottoman control. By the mid-16th century, under the rule of Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottoman Empire had reached its zenith. It controlled all of Anatolia, most of the Arab world, including Iraq, the Levant, the Arabian Peninsula, and North Africa, as well as large parts of southeastern Europe. The Ottomans created a vast multi-ethnic and multi-religious empire that restored a degree of imperial unity to the Middle East not seen since the Abbasid era. Crucially, this period also solidified new geopolitical and sectarian divisions. In the early 16th century, the Safavid dynasty emerged in Persia, establishing Shia Islam as the state religion and forming an ideologically opposed state to the Sunni Ottoman Empire. This Ottoman-Safavid rivalry would shape regional politics and sectarian identities well into the modern era, and formed the roots of many enduring divisions between Sunni and Shia communities across the Middle East. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the Ottoman Empire ranked among the most powerful states in the world. It controlled key trade routes between East and West, including the Silk Road and the maritime routes of the Red Sea, and major cities like Istanbul, Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad flourished as centers of commerce, education, and culture. The Ottoman administration utilized the millet system, which granted various communities, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and others, a degree of religious autonomy. The Sultan also held the title of Caliph, thereby claiming the spiritual leadership of the Sunni Muslim world. However, by the late 17th and 18th centuries, the empire began to experience a relative decline. Internally, it struggled with corruption, economic stagnation, and bureaucratic inefficiencies. Externally, European powers, particularly Austria, Russia, and later Great Britain and France, began to chip away at Ottoman territory and influence. The empire, increasingly viewed as backward compared to the rapidly modernizing European states, earned the moniker the sick man of Europe. In response, a series of reform efforts known as the Tanzimat was initiated in the 19th century. These reforms aimed to modernize the Ottoman army, civil administration, and society along European lines. Although some successes were achieved, such as legal reforms and improved infrastructure, the reforms were uneven and could not reverse the empire's strategic decline. Meanwhile, European imperial ambitions in the Middle East intensified. Great Britain established control in the Persian Gulf and gained significant influence in Egypt, especially after the construction of the Suez Canal in 1869, which made Egypt a crucial hub in global trade. In the eastern Middle East, Persia, modern-day Iran, remained formally independent but came under increasing pressure from both Russia and Great Britain. The discovery of oil in the country in 1908 marked a turning point, ushering in the Age of Oil and attracting further Western interest. By the early 20th century, the Arabian Peninsula had also gained strategic importance through oil production, positioning the entire Middle East as a region of vital economic and geopolitical significance. The ultimate end of the Ottoman Empire came with World War I. In 1908, a reformist nationalist group known as the Young Turks seized power and led the empire into an alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary. The war proved disastrous. The Ottomans fought on multiple fronts against Russia in Anatolia and against British forces in Arabia, Mesopotamia, and Palestine, suffering devastating defeats. During the conflict, Arab leaders, most notably Sharif Hussein bin Ali of Mecca, entered into negotiations with Great Britain, and in exchange for launching a revolt against the Ottomans in 1916, they were promised support for an independent Arab kingdom after the war. However, these promises clashed with other secret agreements. In the Balfour Declaration of 1917, Great Britain expressed its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Meanwhile, the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, secretly negotiated between Great Britain and France, outlined plans to partition the Arab provinces of the Ottoman Empire into spheres of influence. At the end of the war, the Ottomans were defeated and the empire collapsed. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 formalized the dismemberment of Ottoman territories, although the Turkish War of Independence soon led to the founding of the Republic of Turkey in 1923 under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. In the aftermath of World War I, the modern Middle East was shaped by European colonial powers. The League of Nations issued mandates that legitimized British and French control under the pretext of preparing the territories for independence. Great Britain received mandates over Iraq, Transjordan, and Palestine, while France took over Syria and Lebanon, borders that roughly followed the Sykes-Picot Agreement. These artificial boundaries were drawn with little regard for the region's complex ethnic, tribal, and sectarian realities, sowing the seeds for many conflicts that would erupt later in the 20th century. The Arabian Peninsula took a different path. Great Britain had previously recognized the rule of the Al Saud family over Central Arabia. Following their conquest of rival territories, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was founded in 1932. Meanwhile, South Yemen remained a British colony centered on the port of Aden. In Palestine, the conflicting promises made to both Jews and Arabs led to growing tensions. Increased Jewish immigration following the Balfour Declaration resulted in escalating conflict between Jewish and Arab communities, foreshadowing the ultimate and ongoing crisis over the future of Palestine. During the 1920s and 1930s, European powers maintained dominance throughout the Middle East. Yet anti-colonial sentiment and nationalism steadily grew among the local populations. Iraq experienced uprisings against British control and gained nominal independence in 1932, although Great Britain retained military bases and significant influence. The situation was similar in Egypt, which, despite being technically independent since 1922, remained under de facto British control until after World War II. In Iran, which had never been formally colonized, British and Russian interference remained pervasive due to its vast oil reserves and strategic location. This interwar period also witnessed the emergence of new ideological movements, particularly Pan-Arabism, which advocated for the political unification of the Arab peoples, and the rise of nationalist parties striving for self-determination and an end to foreign rule. With the outbreak of World War II in 1939, the Middle East once again became a strategically vital theater. The region saw intense fighting between Allied and Axis powers, particularly in North Africa and the Levant. The war further strained European imperial capacities and fueled nationalist expectations, as colonial rulers relied on local cooperation and made promises for post-war reforms. At the end of the conflict, European colonialism was unraveling, and the push for independence was unstoppable. The first wave of decolonization between 1943 and 1946 saw the withdrawal of Great Britain and France from Syria, Lebanon, Transjordan, and Iraq. In 1948, Great Britain completed its withdrawal from Palestine. However, this departure triggered one of the most enduring and volatile conflicts in the modern history of the Middle East. The previous year, the United Nations had voted for the partition of Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. While the plan was accepted by the Jewish leadership, Arab leaders rejected it, viewing it as a violation of Arab self-determination. When Israel declared its independence in May 1948, neighboring Arab states Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, and Iraq invaded, sparking the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Israel not only survived the attack but expanded its territory beyond the borders proposed by the UN. As a consequence, hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs were displaced, becoming refugees in surrounding Arab states. This deepened Arab bitterness and entrenched a conflict that would reoccur repeatedly in the following decades. In the post-war years, the Middle East underwent a profound political transformation as colonial powers retreated and new nation-states emerged under the influence of post-colonial ideologies, particularly Pan-Arabism. The most prominent champion of this movement was Gamal Abdel Nasser, who came to power in Egypt following a military coup in 1952 and became president in 1954. Nasser's vision of Arab unity, socialism, and anti-imperialism gained widespread appeal and led to the short-lived United Arab Republic, a union of Egypt and Syria, from 1958 to 1961. His nationalization of the Suez Canal in 1956 and the subsequent Suez Crisis, when Great Britain, France, and Israel invaded Egypt, elevated Nasser's status as a regional hero. Although Egypt's military performance was mixed, international pressure, particularly from the United States and the Soviet Union, forced the invaders to withdraw, signaling the effective end of traditional European imperialism in the region. Yet, despite its appeal, Pan-Arabism ultimately failed. Ideological discord, regional rivalries, poor economic performance, and crucially, The failure to resolve the Palestinian question led to widespread disillusionment. This sense of failure was exacerbated after the Six-Day War of 1967, in which Israel decisively defeated Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, and occupied the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and the Sinai Peninsula. The scale and speed of the defeat discredited Arab nationalist regimes and fueled the rise of Palestinian nationalism, increasingly led by Yasser Arafat and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. In 1973, Egypt and Syria launched the Yom Kippur War in an attempt to reclaim lost territories. Despite initial gains, the war ended in a stalemate. However, the most significant consequence was a global oil crisis triggered by an Arab oil embargo against the United States and other countries supporting Israel. This moment underscored the growing economic and geopolitical importance of the Middle East, as oil became a central element of global power dynamics. Then, in 1979, two seismic events permanently reshaped the region. First, Egypt under President Anwar Sadat became the first Arab country to make peace with Israel, signing the Camp David Accords and regaining the Sinai Peninsula in exchange for diplomatic recognition. Second, and of greater long-term regional significance, was the Iranian Revolution. The overthrow of the Western-backed Shah and the establishment of an Islamic Republic under Ayatollah Khomeini introduced a radical model of political Islam. The revolution not only shattered relations with the United States but also challenged secular Arab regimes and Sunni monarchies, igniting a new ideological rivalry across the entire region. In response to the perceived threat, Iraq under Saddam Hussein invaded Iran in 1980, sparking the Iran-Iraq War. The conflict was brutal and inconclusive, lasting 8 years and causing massive casualties. Iraq emerged from the war economically crippled and heavily indebted to the Arab Gulf states, particularly Kuwait. Consequently, Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990 to erase its war debts and control more oil reserves. This aggression provoked the Gulf War, as a U.S.-led international coalition swiftly intervened in 1991 and expelled Iraqi forces. Although militarily successful, the war marked the beginning of a prolonged U.S. military presence in the region, with American bases and defense partnerships expanding across the Gulf. This intervention also heightened perceptions of Western imperial overreach, particularly among Islamist groups. By the turn of the millennium, this deepening U.S. presence was increasingly viewed with resentment by some in the region, seen as an affront to sovereignty and an enabler of authoritarian regimes. This resentment helped fuel the ideology of radical Islamist groups, culminating in the 9/11 attacks in 2001 by al-Qaeda. The attacks prompted the U.S.-led war on terror, making the Middle East its epicenter. Following the invasion of Afghanistan, the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003 under the pretext of eliminating weapons of mass destruction and overthrowing Saddam Hussein. While his regime quickly collapsed, Iraq descended into sectarian conflict, with violence escalating between Sunni and Shia factions, creating fertile ground for extremist movements. This regional instability set the stage for the Arab Spring in 2011, a wave of popular uprisings demanding democratic reforms and an end to authoritarian rule. The uprisings began in Tunisia and quickly spread to Egypt, Libya, Syria, and beyond. Although Tunisia transitioned to democracy, most outcomes were grim. Egypt's democratic experiment was short-lived, ending in a military coup in 2013. Libya and Yemen plunged into chaos, and in Syria, President Bashar al-Assad's refusal to step down led to a devastating civil war. The conflict displaced millions and became a proxy war involving Russia, Iran, Turkey, and Western powers, with each side backing opposing factions. Amidst this chaos, a new jihadist force emerged, drawing strength from disenfranchised Sunni communities and the ruins of post-occupation Iraq. ISIS, or the Islamic State, declared a caliphate in 2014 and captured large territories in Iraq and Syria. The group committed widespread atrocities and utilized online propaganda to recruit followers globally. By 2017, a combination of U.S.-led airstrikes, Iraqi and Kurdish forces, as well as Russian and Iranian-backed Syrian forces, managed to dismantle the group's territorial control, although it continues to operate as a regional insurgency. Throughout the 21st century, the region has also witnessed significant geopolitical realignments. Iran expanded its influence across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen through militias and proxy groups, forming a strategic corridor often referred to as the Shia Crescent. This challenged the interests of Sunni powers, notably Saudi Arabia and its Gulf allies, who viewed Iran's growing regional influence as a direct threat to their own security and ideological leadership. Iran's nuclear program, long an international flashpoint, further exacerbated tensions. Although Iran insisted the program was for peaceful purposes, many Western and regional powers feared it could lead to the development of nuclear weapons and potentially trigger a regional arms race. Meanwhile, Turkey and Recep Tayyip Erdogan reasserted their regional ambitions, pursuing an independent foreign policy, deploying troops in Syria, Libya, and the Caucasus, and frequently clashing with Kurdish groups seeking autonomy in Iraq and Syria. These competing spheres of influence among Iran, Turkey, and the Arab Gulf states have shaped a multipolar Middle East with shifting alliances and persistent rivalry that define much of the region's strategic landscape. Amidst these rivalries, however, some Arab states began to reassess their positions. In 2020, the U.S.-brokered Abraham Accords were signed, facilitating the normalization of relations between the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco with Israel. Shared concerns regarding Iran and frustration over the stalemate in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict were also key motivations, marking a significant shift in regional diplomacy. Today, the Middle East remains a complex and contested geopolitical landscape. While some states, particularly in the Gulf, have experienced rapid modernization and robust economic growth driven by oil wealth, tourism, and investments, others remain plagued by authoritarianism, corruption, and conflict. Deep-seated sectarian, ethnic, and political rivalries persist, and the legacy of foreign interventions continues to shape public opinion and regional alignments. The region stands at a crossroads, rich with potential, yet burdened by a history of division, intervention, and unfulfilled hopes. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel and like if you enjoyed it. See you soon.